It's only been 2 games that we've seen out of Aaron Bradshaw, but if he plays like he did against Penn, then the Wildcats should have very little front court concerns heading into the SEC slate.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, writer for Sports Illustrated for various SEC-related things. But on this podcast, we take a dive into all things Kentucky athletics. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. You can go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. That is PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. On today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we are going to be discussing Aaron Bradshaw's performance against the Penn Quakers. Also going to be recapping that game since I did not get a chance to do that over this weekend. Finally back. It has been over a week since I have recorded an episode for you guys. Obviously, a lot of pre-recorded stuff has gone out since then, but I'm excited to get back into the swing of things. Still under the weather after a pretty major health event for me, so we'll try and knock this one out. Thank you so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. I want to remind everyone out there that we are free and available on all platforms. Let's go ahead and get into what I thought was an incredibly impressive performance against the Pennsylvania Quakers. 81-66 was the final score in that game, in case you did not get to see it. If you did not get to see it, this episode is going to be perfect for you. But I wanted to start off today's episode, instead of talking about the whole, which I think that were some positive things to take away from this one. A lot of positive things to take away from this one. Kentucky scoring 81, rebounding offensively. Aaron Bradshaw coming off the bench and playing 29 minutes for the Kentucky Wildcats. We'll look at a stat line that I want to dive into what he did in this one. He was 7 of 12 from the floor, finished with 17 points, 11 rebounds, a steal, and 3 blocks, again, in 29 minutes. He was also 1 of 2 from beyond the arc. I said before Aaron Bradshaw even touched the court a couple of games ago that we should not, as Kentucky fans, expect him to be as statistically efficient as some of the other players in this rotation, because not every single player is going to come out there and light up the world offensively. You look at guys like Rob Dillingham, who are still shooting over 51% from 3. Reed Sheppard, still shooting 61% from the floor, 59% from outside the arc, averaging 13 points a game. Wagner's numbers are starting to get just a little bit better. A player like Justin Edwards, his numbers are getting just a little bit better. Overall, you look up and down this roster, and you've got some pretty efficient shooters, including Antonio Reeves, who's shooting 51% from the floor, 43% from deep. You've got some really good shooters on this roster, and my concern was that whenever we got to see Bradshaw take a step out there, he wasn't going to be able to fill it up as consistently as some of these other players. In fact, I did not think that he was going to be utilized heavily for the first few games at all, and I was concerned that the fan base would then therefore criticize him for not being quote-unquote good or quote-unquote ready whenever it's just normal, I think, development compared to the pacing of some of these other guards that the Wildcats have on their roster. But Aaron Bradshaw, in his second game, Kentucky had to, I think, rely on him a little bit with the way that Penn wanted to play down low. Very aggressive from some of their players. I was really impressed with the way that they tried different things in this game that we'll get into later. But Bradshaw down low was able to collect those points and was able to physically impose his will at different times. Now, it was not consistent. Obviously, he's going to need to grow a little bit. He's going to need to mature and develop a little bit here. But I was impressed with some of the things that I saw early on from Aaron Bradshaw against Penn. You got to see him fight for some of these rebounds in awkward spots. You got to see him finish at the rim in transition. That's something that we talked about that was going to be, I thought a big part of his offensive game, once he does finally settle in to this squad here, and he's able to kind of get his bearing, which he seems to have already started to get a hold of. But to go for 17 and to have 29 minutes, I think is a little bit of an overshot of where I expected him to be. Again, like I mentioned, for these first few games of his career. Now, I think that we also have to have the conversation about Trey Mitchell not having statistically the most phenomenal game. He was 2 of 7 from the floor, had 3 turnovers to 4 assists, had 9 rebounds, but just a couple of bad turnovers in this one from Mitchell. Not like end of the world play, just not a good game from Mitchell. How much of Bradshaw's production came in lieu of Mitchell's poor play? I don't know. Maybe we won't see Bradshaw score 17 again this season. I'm not saying that he won't. I'm just saying Kentucky's got right now so many other pieces on this roster that can go and light it up, that can go and score the basketball, that while I'm going to give Bradshaw his praise here, and I'm very impressed with his debut and the aggression that his 7'1" frame brought to the Wildcats down low. I also want to point out that, hey, this may not happen consistently. Just because he scores 17 once does not mean that we should hop on some sort of bandwagon and say certain ridiculous things. And I'm not saying that I've seen anything. I'm not saying that I've been watching anybody online say anything ridiculous about Bradshaw. I just want to go back to the refrain I had before he started playing, which is that he's very, very talented, but he's also very, very young, and he's getting thrown into the fire. 9 games into the season. He's going to play against North Carolina this Saturday. So just be excited. If he continues to play well, we will continue to hype him up, and then this will become a non-issue. But understand that everybody on this roster, these freshmen, has taken some sort of really impressive step forward, whether it be statistically or some individual things that we've seen happen on the court that have brought value to the team. Obviously, DJ Wagner in his defense and just what he is out there being a huge example of that. But Bradshaw, I just want to be patient. I don't want to be like, oh, and here's another guy that's going to average 25 a game for Kentucky. Why don't we just come on? I'm very excited, but also let's watch how it pans out and let's watch him develop, because I think at the end of the year he's going to end up being a pretty special player. Played very well against Penn this past Saturday. Speaking of that matchup, I want to actually get into a recap of that game because I've not actually gotten a chance to talk to you guys about that one. In case you didn't get to see it, we're going to discuss some of the good, some of the bad, and what Kentucky should be thinking about moving forward. Before I get to that, though, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. It's what brings home the winning trophy, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. And eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. And with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. And with all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. You can keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. That is eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit. Only available to U.S. customers. All right, continuing along here on the Monday edition of Locked On Kentucky, Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. If you have not subscribed to the Locked On Kentucky YouTube channel or podcast feed, wherever you are tuned in, I would really appreciate it if you went ahead and did that. Join the club. It's been a lot of fun here over these past few weeks, seeing a massive surge in growth on both ends. I'm really, really excited to get this season kind of going here as we get closer and closer to SEC play. It's going to be a lot of fun. You're going to want to join up. Subscribe wherever you are tuned in. Okay, I want to dive into this Kentucky versus Penn game because I really do think that there were some very positive things to take away, but also I do have some criticisms. We'll start here briefly with what I just discussed. Aaron Bradshaw, 17 points, 11 rebounds, double-double in his second game as a Kentucky Wildcat, was physically imposing down low at times. He was 1 of 2 from 3. Both of them were wide open shots, good shot selection. The second one, I wish he could have had back. I guarantee if you give him a second shot at it, it's probably going in. I'm just a little too strong. But yeah, Bradshaw played well. He knew his role offensively, and he did some really good things. Rob Dillingham was the other player that also impressed. 17 points off the bench, 3 of 5 from beyond the arc. He only had 1 assist to 3 turnovers, but he had 3 rebounds, a couple of steals as well. Was not distributing the basketball a ton in this one. Actually, Kentucky wasn't distributing the ball a whole lot statistically in this one, even compared to Penn and compared to some of their past games here. But that wasn't necessarily a massive issue, or it wasn't really an issue in this one at all. But Rob Dillingham got downhill, made a couple of shots, missed a couple of shots as well. Overall, I would say that it was a very solid performance from the individual there, and Rob Dillingham. Antonio Reeves had 16 points on 7 of 13 shooting. DJ Wagner had 9 points on 4 of 9 shooting. He also had 7 assists just to only 2 turnovers there. And those were the 3 guys that were there in scoring, that were impressive scoring the basketball. Overall, as the game progressed, it was sort of there was never a point where Kentucky, until late, established like any sort of consistency when it came to the flow of the game, because Penn's not a bad team, and they were able to fight back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And it was kind of a game of runs where Kentucky and Penn were kind of deadlocked there for a portion of the first half. Then you got to see Kentucky make their move, and you got to see Penn make their move and respond and cut it to, I believe it was to back down to 10 points at halftime, and then they cut it to 5 early in the second half, and then Kentucky was kind of able to, regain themselves, and then Penn came back, and it was just kind of back and forth until late, where Kentucky did end up pulling away in this one. Again, at 81-66, the final score here. I'm impressed with the fact that Kentucky, unlike last week, was able to withstand some of these runs from the opposition, and then they were able to close out the game, which is kind of weird considering this one was at a neutral site, and the previous contest, the loss to UNC Wilmington, was at home in Rupp, and you were simply not able to do anything defensively that would have given you a hope in that one, or stop the bleeding, or stop those runs. But I was impressed. I was impressed with the fact that Kentucky showed a little bit of resiliency against what I think is a well-coached team. I don't think that Penn is a great team by no means, but I think that they definitely have a little something there, and they are well-coached. I think that once you look past the pacing and you look past the overcoming the adversity, you start to get into some of these different negative things that I want to talk about today, which revolve around Kentucky's defense. And I was talking to somebody watching this game, and we were having a conversation about the different miscues and just the lack of direction it seems sometimes that Kentucky has, especially down low. And no team is ever going to be defensively perfect. No team is. But Kentucky, for 9 games now, has been caught sleeping consistently with their rotations and their switches, and it leads to open baskets that should not be there. It leads to open baskets both at the rim and away from the rim. And there were so many moments in this contest where Penn was able to get a little backdoor slip, and it was just open. Or if they wanted to drive down to the hole and run a set to clear somebody up to do that, there was no help. Kentucky was just not there. to even try and recover. And I understand the fact that this is a young team. I understand the fact that there are going to be growing pains. We've talked about this. But now that we're 9 games into the season, and none of this has improved. In fact, it's gotten worse at times. I think we may just have to accept that what I said, and I did not say all of this just to say, hey, by the way, I was right about something that was not that shocking. It's not like it was a difficult thing to predict. I think this may come back to what I said at the beginning of the season, which is Kentucky will be a very good offensive team, but they may just not have it on defense. They may just be okay. They may just tread water. And that's fine, I guess, as long as you don't have nights like UNC Wilmington consistently. You can only really have that happen, I would say, maybe once or twice again this year. You've got to be able to find a baseline for your performance here on the offensive end, I'm saying. But defensively, Kentucky continues to get beat on different sets consistently. And there's no trend where it's like it's an extremely tall team and it's an extremely athletic team. It's a very efficient team that's doing these things to them. It's kind of themselves. And you look at the players that Penn had in this one. Slatchert was obviously one of the big problems here. Their leading scorer, 17 points. Nick Spinoso, I believe that's how Spinoso was probably one of the least athletic big men I've ever seen that was able to do so many different things because of the fact that he was just physically able to kind of push people off his spot and was able to get around them. I was impressed with Spinoso and his play. Only had 10 points, 4 or 5 shooting, though. Had 5 assists, 4 blocks, a steal, 9 rebounds. And he was not, intimidating, but just physically kind of pushed Aaron Bradshaw around a little bit, pushed Trey Mitchell around a little bit, and was able to get his. And got to the foul line a little bit as well, was 2 of 5 there. Did not shoot very well from the charity stripe. But Kentucky's got to be able to find a way to stop the bleeding just a little bit. And I think we have an answer to that. I think we have an answer to it. And I want to talk about that. I want to talk about what the solution to this problem could be, or at least a half solution, because I don't think this is not going to fully become resolved. Like I said earlier, Kentucky just may be okay on defense. But I think that there is a way that you kind of fix part of it. Before I get into that, though, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at Prize Picks. I have actually been using Prize Picks quite a bit recently. Really loving what I'm doing with different NFL games. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's literally just you against the numbers. It's a lot of fun. And so instead of battling thousands of other players, pros and sharks, different things like that, you can literally just look and pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch your winnings roll in. I can make my picks in less than a minute. I actually did that today for a couple of different Monday Night Football games. They're super quick withdrawals. It's easy gameplay, and there are an enormous selection of players and stat types. It's what makes Prize Picks, again, the #1 daily fantasy sports app. And with basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League, a league created specifically for combo projections that include 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. So, for example, you could take LeBron James, Travis Kelce at a 10.5 combo of 3-pointers made and receptions, and you could pick more or less whether or not you thought Kelce and James would combine for more or less 3-pointers made, 10.5 3-pointers made, and receptions. Lots of fun going on over at Prize Picks. You can go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. If you do that, I would encourage you to check out some of their stuff on passing for NFL games, whether it be for Thursday night football, Sunday night, Monday night, I really enjoy picking more or less on the passing yards, the combined passing yards, receiving yards as well. That has proven to be pretty consistent for me. So prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege. Use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. That is Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. All right, wrapping up the Monday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. If you have not subscribed to the channel or to the podcast feed, would really appreciate it if you went ahead and did that. Okay, so Kentucky basketball gets it done against Penn. 81-66 is the final score. They shoot 50% from the floor, 40% from beyond the arc, only 50% from the charity stripe. Aaron Bradshaw, mainly the guilty party there, and then Antonio Reeves missing his lone free throw. Only took 10 free throws, so not a ton of fouls from either team. Hey, by the way, randomly, but before we talk about the solution, I think the partial solution to Kentucky's defense, this may be one of the worst officiated games I've ever seen on both ends of the floor. It was awful. It was awful. It was really bad. This is now 2 games in a row where you have seen some bad, sorry officiating. Clean it up. There's nothing any of us can do. We're all at the mercy of the whistle at different points in our own lives, but clean it up. This was egregious. It was just, they missed travels. They let each other physically beat the snot out of each other. The Spinoso kid got hacked all game, and he only took 5 free throws, which shocks me looking at the box score. Kentucky also in that first half was getting beaten to death at the rim, and the refs were just like, okay, whatever. Just not a good look. Not a good look. I'll tell you what is a good look, though, is Kentucky maybe finding some more stability down low. And I think that's where you will see some slight improvement. And this is not a revelation, but I think the partial solution to Kentucky fixing their defense is for them to get Ugonna Onyenso back. And I understand that we're probably not going to get Zvonimir Ivisic. We did an episode about that recently. A lot of people saw it. Don't know why, but a lot of people did. But Onyenso, I have continued to say, project, guess, speculate, whatever you want to call it, that he's going to be Kentucky's best defensive prospect that they have. He's going to be their best defensive player. And I stand by that. Probably going to get him back within a couple of weeks at the most. I don't think we're going to see him this weekend against North Carolina. Probably not going to see him against Louisville. Illinois State, maybe. We'll see what happens there. But Kentucky to get a third player in that center rotation, to get a third player now to go alongside Mitchell and Bradshaw, and for it to be the physically most aggressive and whenever I say the heaviest, I don't mean, you understand what I'm saying. He's like 240 pounds as opposed to Aaron Bradshaw, who was like 225, and then Trey Mitchell, who's 230. He's probably got 10 to 15 pounds on the next closest front court player that Kentucky's operating with. I think he's going to help some things out there at the rim. Now, the way Kentucky likes to play defense, I think, is also not helping their cause at the rim, because I would love to see whoever is in at center not consistently get pulled away from the basket for an assignment. If a 7-footer or a big man for the opposing team that can't shoot is electing to waddle outside and kind of push and pull and kind of get different matchups going where they can get to the rim or they can find somebody cutting to the rim while your big man is away. Let's stop doing that. Let's run something different, please. Let's run some type of zone. Let's run a 2-3. Let's do something where you will consistently find the man that you want in the paint. I don't understand some of the decisions defensively that are being made with Kentucky's roster, but you know what? It's not a complete and total failure on the defensive end 54th nationally in adjusted efficiency is not bad. Certainly not bad. But it's not where I think Kentucky could be. Ugonna getting him back and getting him physically ready to, I don't think dominate, but I think give the Wildcats some consistency there will be nice. It'll be refreshing. So if you've got any thoughts on Kentucky basketball's defense, on their front court, on how they looked against Penn, you can leave all of that in the YouTube comments below. And I think that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. You can follow the show on Twitter at LockedOnUK. You can follow me on Twitter at LanceDawe_. And you can follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, leave those in the YouTube comments below. Hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Have a great rest of your day, and God bless.